Hi everyone, and welcome to season 3 of the Viaduct. The Viaduct is a seasonal lecture series where we bring people and ideas that have the power to transform our city to Toronto, to this audience, so that we have a chance to learn and we have a chance to discuss. Our name is taken from the Prince Edward Viaduct. This is the bridge that goes between Bloor and Danforth over the Don Valley. And the reason this is kind of the spiritual ancestor of this talk is that the Viaduct is it's a very inspirational story of what people believed Toronto could be. Around the time that the Viaduct was being built, Toronto was not really a particularly important or interesting place. It was kind of like a backwater. To give you a sense of the size and scale of the city at the time, this is from the 1930s, so that's like 2 decades or a decade and a half after the Viaduct was finished, and this is North York. This is, if you think about kind of like going up on the Yonge Line where you see all those skyscrapers today, this is what that looked like in the 1930s. And when the architects of the Viaduct, R.C. Harris and the other people working on the bridge, were imagining the future of the city, though, they saw this gleaming metropolis. They thought that Toronto was going to one day be a center of industry, of culture, of the arts, and they wanted to build infrastructure for that future. But they built this bridge when it was just a couple 100,000 people, and created the infrastructure for that future. And it was actually many, many years later that the city caught up to them. You can actually see with this, if you look today, you'll see that in the Viaduct, underneath the main road, there's actually a place for a subway. They built the area for the subway when they were first constructing this bridge in the 1910s, but it wasn't actually used until the 1970s. That's how far into the future they were imagining. And the hope for this lecture series is that in the same way that they imagined a future for the city that was much greater than it was and built the infrastructure needed for it, we are going to do the same for the city of Toronto as an intellectual community and as a hub for ideas and a hub for community in thinking and talking about education and research. And so, thank you for joining us for this experiment. Please, this evening, take time to learn, listen, discuss, and meet someone new, have a conversation. The hope is that the space is for you. This season, the theme is hidden infrastructure. So last week, we heard from Kevin Bryan, who talked to us about the city as hidden infrastructure. It's something that we all live in, we all interact with the city every day, but what does it actually mean? What does it do? Why is it related to progress? Or is it even related to progress? If you were here, you know that we weren't quite so sure on that last front. This week, we're going to hear from Bonnie, and I'm going to introduce her later, so I will not spend much time. I think everyone here knows they're here for Brave New Algorithm, at least hopefully you do. And then next week, we're going to hear from Alex Danko on magic words. And think about language as a hidden kind of infrastructure that shapes our lives. So we just heard from Cameron, beautiful set. Thank you very much, Cameron. That was amazing. If you enjoyed the music, you can follow Cameron on Instagram. Now, giving a little introduction to the evening, I'm about to hand it over to our sponsors for the event. And then, after that, I'll introduce Bonnie. We'll have, Bonnie will speak, I think, for about 40 minutes to an hour. Then we'll have some Q&A, and then we'll transition to a social hour afterwards. Everyone feeling good? Everyone excited? We're going to have a wonderful evening? Okay. Over to our sponsors, New.
Thank you, Ben. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Hi. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all having a good day so far. If you were here for last week's lecture, I had some chill music going on. Today, you have to imagine the music. I can loop you into a little bum, 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 and you can imagine that's still going. But, yeah, welcome. I want to start by saying that the clicker isn't working. Okay, there you go. I want to start by saying thank you to Ben for everything he's doing with the Toronto Society for diffusion of useful knowledge. as well as obviously the Viaduct lecture series that you're all here for tonight. I want to thank all of the speakers. Last week we had Kevin. Today we have Bonnie. Next week we'll have Alex. I want to thank all of the staff and production crew for making tonight possible, and I want to thank all of you in the room for being here. New is a media company that reveals depth. We like to take subjects that the world might already feel like it understands, and we have a lot of fun showing them in ways that make it feel like you're seeing it again for the first time. We do this through a couple different projects. The other stuff is a show in which we conduct interviews and field investigations with individuals, environments, subject matters that we find interesting. We go out, we let these things affect us, and we process that out loud. Whoops, my bad. New Stadium is a collaborative third space in which we invite creatives, technologists, academics to host their own events and programming and to gather with each other. And New Studio is our production arm in which we work directly with companies and individuals that we believe are at the frontier of their respective domains, and we help them express their vision through filmmaking. Last week I left that audience with a bit of like a mental exercise. So I was thinking today I'd leave you all with a physical exercise, or at least the suggestion of. But I came across this fun fact the other day. This guy named Stephen Newman, he one day decided to just walk for like 25,000 kilometers. That was pretty cool. And the reason why he went on this walk was because he was like, you know, he's seen all this bad stuff and he's like, is the world really this bad? So he went on this really long walk across 21 countries. He gets robbed, he gets into a couple fights, and he concludes that it's not that bad. So I'll leave you with a little recommendation or suggestion, especially as the weather's getting nicer. Go out for a walk, let it affect you, share what you learn with somebody. I hope you enjoy the evening. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Tommy. I can very honestly say that everything that the Toronto Society does would not be possible without new systems, without Tommy and everything that the team has done. They were a crucial inspiration for this series originally, and I'm thrilled that we get to partner. If that was intriguing at all to you and you want to learn more, I highly recommend you stop by New Stadium for an event sometime and learn more about their work. Does anyone know what this is? Hands up, don't shout it out. Nobody knows what this is. Yeah, you maybe, you have a guess. Yeah, you give a guess, okay. Would you believe me if I told you that one of the most important set of ideas ever birthed in the city of Toronto had this as its home? And that this is, in fact, the locus for a set of theories about our technology, about our media, and about the way that the world works that are perhaps some of the most important things for us to understand going into the age of AI and as we go deeper and deeper into electronic age. It would be true. This is Marshall McLuhan. If you don't know who Marshall McLuhan is, I don't know how you managed that. He's probably the most important intellectual to come out of the city of Toronto, at least in my humble opinion. And he had these theories about media. He had these theories about the way that technology affected our lives. And he would teach in that coach house that I put up on the first slide every week about these theories. And he would gather with people kind of like we're gathering tonight and talk through, what is the future of media? What is the future of this technology? How is it affecting us? And one of the strange things about McLuhan is he thought that there was no better place in the world to do this than Canada. And he was very proud of the fact that he was from here, but also he actually thought this genuinely gave him an edge compared to the Americans who were in the thick of things. And he thought that as America became this environment that had kind of this great technological prowess and was transforming the whole world, it was only in Canada that you could have a counter-environment that could see it, that you could actually get outside of the water that everyone is swimming in and understand what was going on. And if you wanted to have the kind of ideas about technology that would actually be transformative, there was no better place to do it than this. And so I think there's no better place for us to be as we are about to hear from Bonnie on the brave new algorithm. So Bonnie, feel free to stand up. Bonnie is, she's a researcher, she's a designer. Bonnie's a researcher, a designer. I actually first met Bonnie properly, I guess, as part of season 1 for the Viaduct, where she took all of the photography for the show. So all of the beautiful photographs from that, what Bonnie's doing. Since then, I know that Bonnie has worked very closely with a number of people in my Water Network, including with Michelle, who was one of the lecturers at that first season. And I know that everyone who has ever had a chance to work with her has been thoroughly impressed. And I know what we're going to be this evening. And so I guess without further ado, Bonnie, I'll hand it over to you.
Oh my God, it's 3:30 p.m. on a Friday night, and school is out. You throw your pencil case in your backpack, and you're ready to go home. Before you know it, your backpack's on the ground. You're parked on the couch, and you're excited to see your favorite friends, Elmo and Sesame Street. Sesame Street was more than just a show. It was a place that you visited, and yeah, I think that Sesame Street is so special because it was a neighborhood that you got to know so well time after day, and I think it represented a lot more than just being a show. And for you, maybe this show was Mr. Rogers, Dora, or Arthur. And no matter what show it was, I feel like this is the after-school routine we all once knew so well. But times have changed. You know, the internet is a thing, every kid has an iPad and a Netflix subscription. And so what are kids watching these days? Well, before we get into that, I'll take a second to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Bonnie. I spent the first 18 years of my life growing up in Ottawa. Shout out to Canada, if anyone knows where that is. And then I've spent 5 years studying at the University of Waterloo. And throughout that time, I got to work as a designer and engineer, and I experienced firsthand what it's like to make decisions that shape the way that we interact with the technology that we engage with every single day. And yeah, like Ben said, I went on a fun little side quest to do photography for the first season of Viaduct, so that might be why some of you recognize me. And it was actually through that I met my incredible mentor, Michelle Jia, if she's in the audience right now. Yeah, and that's how we began this project. In terms of the process that we underwent for this project, first of all, I interviewed real families, real children, to understand what it was like to navigate today's media ecosystem. Another part of this was actually talking to real child media researchers, some local to the city, like Kim Wilson from TMU. I don't know if she's in the audience tonight. Along with other researchers engaged in the morals within child psychology and children's media, along with books from media theorists like Neil Postman and On an Attention Economy, et cetera, et cetera. We also got straight into the weeds of things. I made 3 separate accounts on YouTube Kids. I was watching videos for different age groups. I looked at the top episodes for children's TV shows from every single decade from the 1960s. But yeah, I think what really qualifies me for all of this, or actually, wait, sorry. I also read The Hungry Hungry Caterpillar twice. But I think what really qualifies me to give this talk is the 18 years that I spent doing this, being a kid. But yeah, just as a legal disclaimer, the views that I express in this talk are mine and my only. They don't necessarily represent the views of the companies that I've worked at or currently work at, etc. Anyways, back to the plot. So these are some of the top children's shows in the last 60 years. And I think these were more than just shows. We loved them not just for their illustrations or how funny they were, but also what they represented. It was a peek into the next stage of our lives. It was a way to imagine what careers or adventures we could go on, and also how to make friends along that journey. I think whether we realized it or not, these characters showed up for us every day, every season, time after time again. We grew up with them across years and seasons, and they were role models and they were friends. But what children consume today looks really different. So let's take a look at this chart. So in the last decade, children's TV viewership has plummeted 80%. Kids are clearly still watching stuff. They spend all their time on their iPads. And so what are they watching? Around 35% of this is streaming. This is pretty similar to TV, so okay, cool. The other chunk of this is YouTube, which anyone with younger siblings or as a parent is probably very aware of. But another meaningful chunk that's currently growing is short form content, which is another 16%. And then we have kind of everything else like DVDs and live television. This is kind of dying out, respectfully. And so we watch YouTube, you watch YouTube, we watch short form content. How different is what we consume from what they consume? So I'm going to tell you this through the story of Billy. Billy is a child and his family. I interviewed them as part of this process. He lives in North York. He lives in a classic Canadian suburb. He just started 2nd grade. And Billy usually watches YouTube once he's home from school while his parents are making dinner. And so he'll open up YouTube Kids and be like, damn, my favorite character is Spider-Man. Why don't I watch that video? I've never seen Spider-Man outside, out and about. So he clicks on this video, his parents look over, they're like, this looks pretty chill. It's just Spider-Man. But let's take a look into what this content actually looks like. Anyways, yeah, that was kind of weird. That was really weird. And I'll spare you from the rest of the video, but it's basically just 10 minutes of this and then rolling around in the forest and jumping over things with really no destination in sight. And the next video that Billy comes across is this, where some random dude is just opening one Spider-Man toy after another for basically 15 minutes straight. And so this content vaguely looks like children's media. It has characters we know and love, there's bright colors, but something feels deeply missing. But yeah, once I had a chance to dig deeper into Billy's kind of just content consumption, I got a chance to look at his video history. And something I started to notice as part of his video history is that everything is quite short. And when we think about the content we consume growing up, it's all usually 30 minutes. There's narrative arcs and character development and trials and tribulations. But yeah, all of the content Billy consumes is actually just 3 to 15 minutes long usually. And if they're not 3 to 15 minutes long, they're actually 15 to 30 seconds because they're YouTube shorts. If there are like 1 to 2 hour videos, then they're just compilations of these 3 to 15 minute videos. But yeah, the other really weird thing is there are these trends that will show up in Billy's feed. One of these is the Finger Family song. And so, credit to James Bridle for first uncovering this in his TED Talk, but the Finger Family song is this weird nursery rhyme where it's always the same song. They sometimes show fingers, sometimes they talk about family members, but all that is to say, as part of this video, they really just keep unpacking one after the other. Billy will click on one, there will be a few more, and then there will be dozens. And then you'll realize that Billy is actually wading through a sea of 132 million of these Finger Family songs. And so just to put that into perspective, this is actually 501 years of Finger Family song content alone. And I think even if this was like row, row, row your boat, I don't think anyone should be listening to any nursery rhyme for more than 30 minutes. But you know, we have autoplay to change things up. And so, unless you've been living under a rock, K-pop Demon Hunters was Song of the Year last year. And so Billy has been watching a lot of Saja Boys content. He wants to see the Saja Boys escape timeout jail. And then the next video he clicks on is some Mario content, because his sister has a Switch and he's been getting really into that. He's actually going to the doctor soon to get some of his vaccines. And so he's like, oh wow, let me watch this worm go get his first vaccine at the doctor's office. But before you know it, he clicks on that video, and then he kind of ends up at the baby factory. And so it's scary, it's confusing. He's like, what am I watching? Now he's afraid of getting poked with 10 different syringes at once. And that's the thing about autoplay on YouTube. It so often devolves into mayhem. There are toy babies repeatedly receiving syringes. There's Elsa taste testing feces on a toilet seat. It is often disgusting, it is violent, and at times even sexual. And so, yeah, I think we want to say that this is an exception to the rule. We want to say that Billy's feet is maybe just really bad. But the truth is that these videos are garnering real attention. So many of these videos have millions, if not billions, of views that are capturing the attention of so many children all across the world. And so I think it's really concerning that this is taking place. And I think it's very tempting for us to say, oh, okay, I think this is all very nonsensical, like obviously this is not reflection of reality. But the thing is that children are by definition learning machines. It is their job to figure out what reality is like and internalize it as normal. And a way to really depict that is through the phenomenon of generational amnesia. This is a term that was coined by an environmental scientist, Daniel Pauly, and it represents the societal forgetting of past environmental states, resulting in each generation to accept a progressively degraded environment as normal. And just to really hit the nail on the head, there's a study done in the 1990s where they asked a bunch of children in Houston. They're like, oh, well, actually, just to preface that, Houston was one of the most polluted cities in America in the 1990s. And so when researchers showed up, they were like, hey, kids, do you know what air pollution is? Like, can you define it for me? And they're like, yeah, like, I know what air pollution is. And so when they actually went to ask these children, okay, well, given that, do you think Houston is polluted? They're like, no, we don't have pollution here. And why would they think that? This is all they had grown up with, they had normalized this. And there's no reason for us to think that the media ecosystem is any different. Everything that we've seen today, that I've shown you from Billy's journey, they're treating this as normal because they haven't seen anything else. And with that said, I think it's really concerning that this is happening here. Oh, sorry. I could go on and talk about the effects that this is happening on their cognition or their attention span, etc. But I think there's a lot of good scientific communication and research about this already. And I think we all intuitively know that this content is really messed up. Like, we don't want our children watching this. I don't think we need these papers to tell us that. And so I think the more interesting question that I'd like to unpack with everyone today is, how did we even get here? Why does this content succeed? And what effect does this have on society at large? And so here's your crash course to modern telecommunications theory in 10 minutes or less. And so in the early 1600s, 1700s, most people were farmers. And with that said, media production was very slow, consumption was very intentional. People were reading multiple hundreds of pages of farmers' almanacs and books about political views and ideas and ideologies. This is what the media ecosystem used to look like. And then the telegraph showed up. And suddenly, communication was instantaneous. You could send a message between Toronto and Waterloo and receive it in seconds. And so we could see how communication slowly started to change. Instead of books or reports that are published yearly, you suddenly have the morning telegraph and the evening telegraph and also the midnight telegraph. And we can see how much space these telegraphs actually provided people to communicate. And so with the telegraph, we now have information that could be easily distributed. And in a lot of ways, it could also be created much more easily too. You could speak into a microphone, send what you have to say, no book publishers, no printing press required. Information will have been created. And with both ease of distribution and ease of creation kind of improving, we now have more information being created than ever before. The thing is that at this time, this technology was still fairly expensive. It was mostly in the hands of media organizations, governments, elites, etc. But once post-World War II showed up, technologization and industrialization meant that most people moved away from manual labor. And what they had was free time, or in other words, attention. And with that attention and dropping costs of radio and television, soon everyone was tuned in to radio and television. They were watching cartoons and game shows. entire countries' worth of eyes were on radio and television. And that means everyone wanted a piece of that pie. They were more incentivized than ever before to put something out there so they could get a piece of people's attention. And so we see that attention actually also incentivizes the creation of information. This is called advertising. And I don't think there's really any technology that really epitomizes this phenomenon more than the internet. And more specifically, social media. Because social media in combination with Steve Jobs' hot new iPhone meant it now looked like this. We had incredible ease of distribution. These platforms were literally designed to make it easy for you to push what you had out there into the world. You could also now create more easily than ever before. You could tap on your phone, you could take a picture, and immediately put it up to the attention of the entire world. And I know when I say social media, everyone's like, damn, you're actually just talking about the devil spawn, like social media feels so evil. But I want to remind everyone that we didn't used to feel this way about social media. While the most early algorithm we had was chronological sorting, eventually we were given options. We could add friends, we could subscribe, we could like, we could follow. We had control over what we were consuming. Or in other words, we were curators. And with control over our media, I think we all have this vague sense or notion, like it feels good to be in control of what it is that we're watching, what it is that we're consuming. But if you think about it rationally, it's like, oh, okay, well, if someone or some entity can kind of like take care of that for me, why does it matter that I'm the one choosing what I'm consuming? And the answer to that lies in something fundamental about the nature of information. And so let's revisit this diagram. But more specifically, I want to focus on this part of the diagram. Because what's really fascinating about this is that this relationship is not one-sided. In 1971, Herbert A. Simon coined the term attention economy. This was way before the internet was even a thing. And as he studied organizations and their efficiency, he realized the bottleneck was that a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. Or in other words, an information-rich world is fundamentally attention-poor. And that's because information consumes. It consumes our attention because it doesn't just exist in a vacuum. And so we live in this world where attention incentivizes the creation of information, but that very information is also what is consuming so much of our attention. And so now we have this power imbalance where it costs nothing to create information, you have everything to gain from creating it and capturing a tiny piece of that pie to monetize it. But we have to safeguard our attention because it is so scarce. Attention is by definition finite, but we can create infinite amounts of information. And so in this attention-scarce world, we end up being flooded by a sea of information. And so in this world where attention is so hard to come by, the most powerful person in the world is actually the curator. Because the power lies in the person who is able to sift through all of this noise, to wade through all of this information and show you what is important and relevant and good. And so that is also why search engines are some of the most valuable companies on this planet. If you think about Maps, Google, YouTube, what they do is that they are sifting through all of that information for you. They decide what information does or does not see the light of day. And therefore, they also choose what you think and feel and do and discuss. And so, as these companies continue to progress, as these social media companies that own our children's media evolve, they discover things like watch time and click-through rate. And slowly, their goal transforms from what is worth our attention to what gets our attention. And I know on the surface, these two things feel really similar, right? It's like, if I spend more time on something, it's usually something I want to spend my time on. And you know what? Even Mr. Beast feels this way. He is arguably the person who has mastered capturing the world's attention with the most YouTube subscribers in the world. But the thing is that that's not actually how attention works. As Chris Hayes, author of The Siren's Call, says, the wail of an ambulance siren, flashing billboards, colorful signs, these all capture our attention, whether we want it to or not. And some of these things we do deem worthy of capturing our attention, right? Like we want to know when the fire alarm is going off. We want to know when the ambulance is within our periphery. But there's also plenty of unworthy things that end up capturing our attention, like yet another poster on the side of the street, a screaming person, or another notification about the state of American politics. When social media begins to take the form of prioritizing what gets and keeps our attention, everything we liked and followed and subscribed to really starts to feel like a vestigial feature of the past. Only 30% of the content in your feed now is what you actually signed up for, and the other 70% is recommended by the algorithm. This is where the algorithm emerges. Because these companies, they realize, well, respectfully, we don't really need you to like and subscribe and follow anymore. Your behavior actually tells us everything we need to know. Your watch time, your click-through rate, this is all very telling. And so, in this sense, the algorithm becomes the curator. But because the algorithm reflects the priorities and the incentives of the companies that they belong to, I think more accurately, it is an advertiser, it is a monetizer, and for the creators that create on these platforms, it is an incentivizer. And so this is where we're at now. We have these companies that drive our children's media, and they're pursuing attention as their ultimate goal. This is what they are mining. And so naturally, this results in two downstream effects, one of which is having the most attention-grabbing content, and the other thing is to deliver it with the most attention-grabbing medium. Attention-grabbing content is the most obvious one. So let's dig into this. This explains everything we saw with Billy's feed. This Spider-Man video is empty and meaningless, and it doesn't succeed because it's challenging you or teaching you something. Actually, the absence of dialogue or any kind of cultural lens means that it's more globally applicable. A child from any part of the world can consume this, and so it's incredibly marketable. The repetitiveness, the same IP, the same music, the same characters repeated over and over again, is really just easy revenue for them. Someone found a formula that works, and now everyone is trying to milk it for what they can. There's no incentive to create something of unique value, especially for children who are completely undiscerning, unpicky viewers. And as for extreme content, this is really just attention-grabbing content, because lies, controversy, taboo topics will catch the attention of children. It also catches our own attention. And so I think that we can all say that this content is really bad, right? I think that's very obvious to us. But we don't yet have language for defining what is good children's media like. What does healthy, nourishing children's media look and feel like? And so I think we need to ask ourselves, what is children's media for? And I think if we think about media as an extension of the things we already aspire to do for our children, what we're really asking ourselves is, what do we as a society owe our children? And so, for the last 40 years, we didn't create children's media by accident. We had a promise, we had a standard for what children's media was supposed to look like, what we felt like children needed to be a whole person. And so there's two frameworks I'd like to introduce you to. One is the windows and mirrors framework. This says that this theory was introduced by Emily Style and Rudine Sims Bishop in the 1980s. And what they say is children's literature should act as either a window or a mirror. Windows allow you to see into the external world, to understand the lives of others, to understand just other things out there in the environment. Whereas mirrors allow you to see yourself, to understand yourself and understand your place in the world and all of this. So in their words, literature transforms human experience and reflects it back to us. In that reflection, we can see our own lives and experiences as part of the larger human experience. Reading, then, becomes a means of self-affirmation. And when the lighting conditions are just right, a window can also be a mirror. The other theory that I want to talk about that actually parallels very similarly to the UN Charter of Children's Rights is the child's right to an open future. This is developed by Joel Feinberg in the 1980s as well. And so what this states is that as adults who have full autonomy and who oversee and protect children, Our job is to protect children in such a way that when they reach and cross this horizon into adulthood, they have as many open possibilities to them as possible. And so when we protect a child from abuse, when we provide them with safe and loving environments, we're really just putting up these guardrails to protect them so that they can cross into this horizon as healthy, fully formed adults. And when we take them to math class, and when we teach them basketball, and when we let them deepen their interest in environmental science, we are opening up these pathways such that when they become adult, they're all available to them. And so, to really sum this up, education should send the child out into the adult world with as many open opportunities as possible, maximizing their chances at self-fulfillment. And so I think when we try to capture all three of these theories, we have windows, mirrors, and what I would like to say, doors. Windows and mirrors help you understand yourself and others and the world and your place in all of this. And Joel Feinberg says that we should open doors for our children. And I think if we try to think about and capture life as a road trip, I think we can really sum it up like this. The first thing that we owe our children is purpose. This is meaning, this is values, this is why we drive the car in the first place and where we're vaguely going. The other thing is possibility. These are all the roads available to you, these are all the destinations you could take. We want to make sure that there's as many of these as possible by empowering children with skills and knowledge and autonomy. And the last thing is citizenship. This is learning how to share the road. This is befriending other travelers. And this is also making sure that no matter what stop you go to, you leave it better than you found it. This is teaching children the obligation that they have not only to themselves and their dreams, but also to the world at large. So yeah, this is the awesome road trip that we are trying to set children up for. And so these are all modern theories, but we've been doing this since the dawn of time. Whether it's the Very Hungry Caterpillar or Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales or Aesop's fables, we have always been guiding children with morals and wisdom and empowering them with skills and knowledge. And so it's really no new feat that we're talking about here. And when I talk about the fact that these social media companies are losing sight of what is worth our attention, this is what I'm talking about. When they look at and measure watch time and click-through rate, what they're not capturing is whether your child experienced joy, whether they walk away from their content feeling inspired, whether they found a new inspirational figure, whether they're excited to go out into the world. Or worse yet, they actually fail to measure whether your child walks away feeling impatient, insecure, just worse off than you found them in the first place. And so when we take a look at the state of children's media today, I think we need to ask ourselves, does this look like opening doors to the future for the next generation? Does this look like possibility, purpose, skills, empowerment? Or does it look like we're actually closing doors on them, one dopamine hit at a time, before they even know that these doors exist? Cool. Yeah, I feel like things have been a little heavy or a little intense. So we can take a quick intermission. Feel free to stretch, just walk around, relax, and I will put on a children's stretching exercise if you'd like to follow along.
You were given a skeleton, and behind that skeleton, there is a spine. But look out, your spine has enemies that will zap your posture and your strength. These are the enemies of the spine. The TV twister, the schoolbook scruncher, and the dinner table disaster. Well, don't just sit there. Get up and help us fight back. Exercise is your best defense, and these are spine tinglers. Head down. Curve the spine all the way. Shake, relax. Roll it up. Stomach flat. Drop the pelvis. Spine straight. Feels great. Take care of that spine. It's the center of every move you make.
Alrighty, okay. Hopefully everyone had a chance to stretch their legs and everything, so you're not too tired. But yeah, where we left off, we talked about how attention became the goal of these social media companies that run our children's media. We talked about how there's attention-grabbing content and how that explains so much of what we saw in Billy's feed. But now I want to talk about something that's a lot more quiet and insidious, something that is slowly shaping our thinking and our children's thinking, and that is the mediums that all of this content is delivered through. And so I think to judge any medium, we have to characterize it, because I don't think that any medium in particular is universally bad or good. They all have their own individual strengths and weaknesses depending on their properties and the goals that we're using them for. And so if we look at short form content in particular, we see that it's obviously visual and in video form. It is short, it is low friction. And because of this, I think it becomes very obvious that short form content serves one particular use case. Is extremely efficient. And so it grabs your attention, it says what it has to say, and then you move on. But the thing is that the shortness of it, the fragmentation of it, it makes it really difficult for us to impart and unpack complex topics like empathy or meaning or citizenship. And when we think about how children's media in the past has unpacked these topics, we see that in the Magic School Bus. They spend 30 minutes showing you what it's like to be an astronaut and engage in space exploration. Sesame Street really takes its time showing you this is what it means to be a good friend and how to treat people and why it's important to be a good friend. And Phineas and Ferb spend episode after episode, season after season showing you the power of inventiveness, the power of perseverance, of showing you that you can bring your dreams to life. And in Arthur, Francine learns the hard way that good things take time and how to navigate complex feelings like jealousy and things like that. All of this is to say that these stories are only possible in a world of longer form media. Or put another way, these stories can't be told in short form content. And that's because when you try to compress all of these down into 15 minutes or less, or even just 15 seconds, you lose the opportunity to communicate complexity, depth, and meaning. And this media is also increasingly difficult to produce in this low-friction media environment that prioritizes recency and quantity as well. And so this is really concerning because, oh, I guess the graph, bro, whatever. This is really concerning because this content is now dominating our children's consumption. Streaming is pretty flat, but we can see that these levels haven't dropped post-pandemic. And if we break down this graph, we actually see that YouTube is actually losing ground to shorter form content, like TikTok and YouTube Shorts. We kind of have the worst of the worst here. And so in Neil Postman's words, a student's freedom to read is not seriously injured by the banning of a book. Today's media clearly does impair the student's ability to read, and it does so with innocent hands. It does not ban books, it simply displaces them. And so we live in this world where it is increasingly difficult to impart these values of purpose, possibility, and citizenship through the media that our children are consuming. And in the words of Adam Alexic, a prolific TikTok creator and linguist, he talks about in his book, Algo Speak, like maybe we could turn Harry Potter into a TikTok miniseries, but if we take a piece of media like Ulysses, we would never be able to transform it into TikTok form. It's simply too disjointed, too nonlinear. It requires very concentrated attention. In other words, people would scroll away. And so stories like Ulysses cannot be told anymore. And I think, does that mean that we should stop telling stories like this? My take is no. I think we need to ask ourselves whether we want to continue living in a media ecosystem where stories like these struggle to be told if not made in the first place. And so what happens is we have all of this great children's media, and all of this turns into a story about grief or divorce and how to navigate these complex topics for children, turn into platitudes about turning that frown upside down. Or a student that is navigating being bullied and going about that journey turns into a sorry and a snack and no real understanding of either person's real emotional state. And the thing is that it's not like good children's content out there doesn't exist. We have PBS Kids, we have CBC Kids. These are publicly funded children's networks. It's that they are struggling to compete in this ecosystem that prioritizes recency and quantity. There are overhead costs that come with obviously doing the research, doing the A/B testing, of making sure that their ideas and their lessons are actually being internalized by children. These are costs that AI slop videos simply don't have to take on. And so, really just to emphasize this message, I want to give you a metaphor. So this is one of the most famous paintings out there. This is Monet's Water Lilies. We can see the details of every brushstroke, we can see the highlights and the shadows. But if we compress this down into a fraction of its size, we obviously can't really appreciate any of these details anymore. In fact, it really doesn't look all that different from this green square, if you even caught the fact that I changed it. And so this is what happens. We live in this world where everyone is incentivized just to create a bunch of flat green squares. This is our children's media ecosystem, because there's no reason to create these beautiful paintings and mosaics anymore when this is all the system really rewards. And you know, I've spent a while trying to rationally convince you of why these mediums are so bad and so difficult for us to communicate and achieve these goals that we have for children. But I think it becomes very obvious when we just look into the real world and how we used to imbue these values to our children. It takes years of math classes and soccer practice in order for children to get meaningfully good at it. It takes years and weeks and months for teachers and parents and just family friends to become trusted, supported figures and role models in these children's lives. Or another way to put it is, how good can you get at soccer if you stop playing like every 5 to 10 minutes? And can you help your child navigate how to get out of a situation where they're being bullied in less than 3 minutes? And the answer is that you can't, because anything meaningful is only really possible in aggregate. It takes dedicated time and attention in order to achieve these things. And so, yeah, in this digital world, we permit our attention and our children's attention to be spliced and diced into these tiny little pieces, only to be aggregated into this whole that feels like a lot less than the sum of its parts. And so this is kind of where we're at. This is the state of our media economy, the attention ecosystem, all this stuff. I'm sure that the parents in the audience are like, well, yikes, like, what do we do now about this? And so I'll go over what some of the latest and greatest research has to say. First of all, this is from the American Academy of Pediatrics. They define good media as being, it has to encourage critical thinking, pro-social themes. There needs to be the sense of agency when they move on from digital activities into real life ones. There should not be commercialized, highly filtered, or violent content. It should be at a relaxing pace. And it should be free of unwanted contact or just negative interpersonal experiences. And when it comes to the amount of screen time, for those under the age of 2, there should just be none. Like, that is the answer. And for children from the ages of 2 to 5, less than 1 hour is generally the recommendation. And in terms of bigger themes, I think one of these is reclaiming our role as curators. This means turning off autoplay, turning off search. This means choosing very specific content libraries and creators and channels for your child to consume content from. And when it comes to fostering anchors to the real world, this means talking to your child about the content that they're consuming, telling them, hey, this is the kind of content you should be watching, and this is the content that is not so good for you, and why. It means co-viewing with them, watching their content with them if you're able to spark a dialogue about it, let them ask questions, deepen their interests. And also making sure that their time spent in the digital world is not displacing real, genuine, meaningful activities in the real world. But yeah, this is what the latest and greatest research has to offer. And I think it feels really dissatisfying. And I think that's because it is. And that's because we still live in this world where 2 parents can have working jobs and still struggle to make ends meet. Being a parent is really hard. And yet all of our solutions about the media ecosystem and treating our children are all about placing the onus on the individual, on the parent. They tell you, turn on these safety settings and have a family media plan and uninstall these apps and yeah, just be a better role model for your children. But I think all of this disregards the elephant in the room, which is that we still live in this media ecosystem where all of these creators and companies and profiteers are so deeply incentivized to continue doing what they're doing and to take down whatever defenses you do put up. In many ways, it's kind of like talking to a community that doesn't have fresh or potable drinking water or clean rivers. Hey man, I think you should buy some more Brita filters and water bottles, I think that would really solve your problem. Instead of thinking about the bigger picture solution, which is how do we provide these communities with clean, potable drinking water? How do we clean up their rivers? And so I do think that there's a bigger, more systemic solution for all of us that everyone can participate in, regardless of whether you are a parent or not. But for that, we need to do another history lesson, so hang in there with me. So TV for children actually used to be really bad too. In fact, it was so bad that everything that Neil Postman was talking about, where television was replacing books and television was dominating our cultural ecosystem and television was diminishing all of the meaningful lessons and content in this world, all of this was discussed in the 1960s that he had been sounding the alarm about. In fact, it was actually so bad that the FCC chair, Newton Minow, in the 1960s gave this speech.
I invite each of you to sit down in front of your own television set when your station goes on the air and stay there for a day without a book, without a magazine, without a newspaper, without a profit and loss sheet or a rating book to distract you. Keep your eyes glued to that set until the station signs off. I can assure you that what you will observe is a vast wasteland.
So those are his words. A vast wasteland is how he used to describe the state of television. But despite this, when Reagan came along in the 1980s, he decided to strip whatever regulations were in place around news and children's media, etc. And so what that meant is so many Emmy Award-winning shows like Captain Kangaroo and Schoolhouse Rock ultimately ended up getting canceled because these networks no longer really had an obligation to host them anymore, and there were more profitable shows to show. This ended up inevitably impacting Canadian television as well, because we source a lot of our content from Americans. And while the CRTC did have stricter guidelines around commercial breaks, etc., this was still influencing Canadian children's television. So what happened was, in the span of just 3 years, we went from 13 shows that were more toy-centric to 70. And toy sales tripled in this time as well. And this happened because of a phenomenon called barter syndication. Basically, these toy companies would show up to these broadcast networks and be like, hey man, I have this show that I made and I'll give it to you for free. And they're like, really? Okay, we'll play it then. Knowing that they would make up all of that revenue with these toy sales. And so after this, the state of children's media was really, there was no line between advertising and content. It was all just a mix. There was a complete absence of pro-social educational content because these broadcast networks no longer had really any incentive to create it. Until Peggy Charon, the founder of Action for Children's Television, decided to step in. She founded a grassroots organization that accumulated over 20,000 volunteers, most of which were mothers who were advocating for better television for their children. I'll let her explain what her motivations were.
And although television can't feed or house our children, it can begin to break the cycle of poverty. I started ACT because I thought that TV was one of the most cost-effective education systems we have in this country. That's what CTW realized when it started Sesame Street as a Head Start program. There was no cheaper way to reach kids who needed to be taught so they could start out on an equal basis with kids who had everything.
And so when she founded this organization, her and all of these mothers took a stand on behalf of their children. They took a stand because they knew that their children did not know that they were being sold to. They did not realize that there were lessons that were missing in the media that they were consuming. And they succeeded. They managed to get this legislation passed in 1990, and this is why children's television looks the way that it does for so many of us. That's why we have regularly scheduled weekly programs that are actually all at least 30 minutes. This is specifically outlined. And they air within hours that children actually consume television. It needs to serve their educational and informational needs, and there needs to be at least 3 hours a week of this core programming. And all of this was really only possible because of this concept of a public trustee. So in 1934, there was a Communications Act that was passed, which basically said, because these broadcasters were borrowing public airways to distribute this content, they owed, because they're using this public resource, they effectively owed the government, they owed the public to use it in the public's interest. And so in Newton Minnow's words, broadcasting, in order to serve the public interest, must have a conscience and a soul. It has to have a burning desire to both sell and excel. It needs to have the urge to build the character, citizenship, and intellectual stature of the people. Doesn't that sound great? And this was only possible because of this framework of them borrowing a public resource. And so I think this invites questions for us to ponder on. Can we consider the internet a public resource? Can we consider our attention a public resource? I don't know. And so children's media has gone through its ups and downs. It's been really bad before, and we took a stand and we fixed it. And so what does that look like for us today? So 3 principles that I'd like to propose to help guide us on this journey are 1, user and trusted figure-driven curation. This means giving us and parents, etc., control over what our children are consuming again. The next thing is to preserve an array of mediums. This means not letting any single medium or way of presenting our content dominate the entire ecosystem, because again, they all have their trade-offs. And the last thing is to reclaim attention as a tool for achieving meaningful goals rather than the goal in of itself. And when it comes to applying this, I think we can imagine it in a few different ways. These are just some ideas, and I invite you to keep thinking about more. We can imagine products and platforms that encourage parents and children to go through upfront curation, where they pick out content that they're interested in or provide details about their child's identity so that they can surface content that's relevant from this pool of content that is made by experts. We can have algorithms that are tuned for not only breadth to open windows and doors, but also for depth so that they can deepen their interests. We can also have multimodal or multimedium content. Imagine watching Sesame Street, and in the middle of it, there's a reading you have to do, and so you go and read it with your parents, and then you come back and you watch the Sesame Street characters discussing that reading, or something like that. And the last thing, arguably most important, is active participation. And so this means making sure children are taking what they've learned and applying it into the real world. Some really incredible examples of this that I found through the history of children's media were 1, Mrs. France's TV show. They would teach children about a topic, and then at the end of that episode, they would actually save a segment at the end to talk to parents like, hey, this is what we discussed with your kid today. These are some questions they might have. This is how you might be able to engage with them. Another great example is the Mr. Wizard Science Clubs. This was not only a TV show where they showed real kids doing science experiments, but they actually had physical clubs and locations all across North America where kids could actually participate in science experiments. They could meet scientists. They could work with other kids to conduct these experiments. And so that, I think, is really cool. And in terms of actual legislation and case studies that I think we can lean on, I think one of the most important ones are, in New York and California, they recently released legislation where they talk about removing addictive feeds and features for children. This means only chronological feeds, no notifications during certain times, etc. I think this is setting precedent for us. There's also the EU Digital Services Act. If anyone's noticed in their feeds that you all now have interested and not interested buttons, it's for this reason. It's because now it is a legal requirement to provide people with more control over their algorithmic feeds. And lastly, Ireland's OSMR Act essentially establishes this super complaint system where trusted nonprofits can essentially do large systemic level investigations and then report those results to regulators in order to hold these companies accountable, which I think is really interesting. And then at the individual level, there's also ways that we can stand up. When Paw Patrol first came out, there was just one female character. She was pink, she was dainty, she was very demure, and moms were really upset about it. They're like, why are you representing women like this? And so they fought back. And the response to that backlash was more representation and more diverse range of characters on that show. And the most prominent one is the ElsaGate investigations of 2017. This is when the worst of YouTube was really surfaced and called out. And this is why some of the most extreme content and channels have now since disappeared from YouTube Kids and YouTube. But clearly the emptiness still remains. In terms of things that you can advocate for in Canada right now, you should go and advocate for the Online Safety Act. This is the successor to Bill C-63 that actually failed because of the dissolution of Parliament a few years ago. And this would actually hold social media platforms accountable to the duties of child protection, responsibility, and making sure certain content is inaccessible to them. So yeah, we've spent a while discussing the horrors of children's media, the state that it's devolved into, and it is very scary. But I think the more bewildering thing is how we even got to this point. In Neil Postman's, one of his most famous talks, 5 Things We Need to Know About Technological Change, he talks about how embedded in every technology is an idea. In the same way that writing rendered memory useless or computers enabled us to see more things as data, every technology has a philosophy, and how that technology makes us use our minds, and how it makes us do things with our bodies, and how it codifies the world, in which of our senses it amplifies, in which of our emotional and intellectual tendencies it disregards. And so I think we should ask ourselves, what is the philosophy of the technologies that we are not only engaging with, but also creating today? Do they free or imprison us? What uses of the mind does it favor? And do we agree with it? And I know everyone's been talking about AI these days, but I think it is really important for us to start considering where does it fit in this picture? How is it impacting creation? How is it impacting how information is distributed and therefore how we interpret and see it? We could go down this rabbit hole, but it's a long one, so I'm not going to unpack it right now. The other thing that Neil Postman warns us about is the mythologization of technology. And that's when we start to treat technology as God-given. In other words, in his prologue to Amusing Ourselves to Death, he warns us about, or he compares 2 different kinds of dystopias. One is the 1984 kind of dystopia that we're very familiar with. There's surveillance, there's censorship, there's this ironclad grip on freedoms of speech, etc. And then there's Brave New World, which is this very eerie kind of utopia. He says, Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information, and Huxley feared those who would give us so much that we would be reduced to passivity and egoism. Orwell feared that the truth would be concealed from us, and Huxley feared that the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance. I think Brave New World is the epitome of what we've caught glimmers of today. It is this slow, passive descent into a world that once promised greatness, but we realize we actually hardly desire. And in a lot of ways, I think it is the ultimate dystopia in how blindly it unfolds and how absent our desire to fight it all is. And so, I think that is so easy for us to forget, especially with generational amnesia, that technology is something we create. That all of the defaults that we've taken for granted, like the fact that we just get notifications or that infomercials are just on at 5 a.m. for whatever reason, these are decisions that someone made with their own incentives and beliefs intertwined with them, even if they aren't malicious. And so I think that's our job. Our job is to not forget. Our job is to remember, to remember what children's media is supposed to be like, to remember a world where children's media actually opened doors and revealed mirrors and windows for the next generation, because they aren't able to experience it right now. And so we decide what is or is not worth normalizing, what a brave new world should really look like. And so, in the spirit of remembering, I'd like for us to revisit a piece of the past that I think is too precious to leave behind. And so, I present you this.
What do you do with the mad that you feel when you feel so mad you could bite? When the whole wide world seems oh so wrong, and nothing you do seems very right. What do? Do you punch a bag? Do you pound some clay or some dough? Do you round up friends for a game of tag, or see how fast you go? It's great to be able to stop when you've planned a thing that's wrong, and be able to do something else instead, and think this song. I can stop when I want to, can stop when I wish, can stop anytime. And what a good feeling to feel like this, and know that the feeling is really mine. Know that there's something deep inside that helps us become what we can. For a girl can be someday a woman, and a boy can be someday a man. Isn't that a good feeling to know that?
All right, thank you so much. Wait, this is so funny. Love you too. But yeah, before we get into Q&A, big thank you to the cast and crew that made this happen. Thank you, Michelle, for all of the time that you spent mentoring me and just helping me navigate this whole journey. Thank you, Ben, for giving me the stage and even letting me have this opportunity in the first place. It's been so full circle. And yeah, shout out to all these other incredible people, Wolver, Jackie, I see you in the front row, and everyone who helped to review early drafts of the script. But yeah, cool. Yay.
Okay. Thank you, Bonnie. Okay, so we're now going to move into Q&A. Take the stage first.
Thanks. I'm the parent of a 10-year-old kid, actually named Billy. And I found.
Wait, that's crazy.
I know, it was weird, and he looks just like the drawing too. I actually found the talk, especially the first half, really upsetting. But I actually found it upsetting because it doesn't match my experience. Like, my experience with Billy is Billy spends a lot of time on the internet, and to me, the content world that Billy is fucking amazing, and it's so rich, and there's so much incredible stuff going on. And so the question that I have is kind of like, the thing that I worry about in talks like this is that there is a very, 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 very long history of people saying, oh, the new medium, the new art, the new thing that the kids are consuming now, that's a problem. So I'm sure there were people sitting in a hall very much like this one in a university in 1962 talking about the Beatles and saying, like, it's just fucking commercial, they're just in it for the money, the songs are short, they make no sense, it's nonsense, it's not real music, we have to protect our kids from this garbage. People said that about rock and roll, they said it about comic books, they said it about Bugs Bunny, they said it about the novel. And so I think there's a really, and they also said, and this time it's uniquely bad, not like all the previous times. You know, this time we really mean it, this time we're right. So I think if you want to make that claim, there's an enormous burden of proof to say, why are you not just in the long history of people, of experts standing in university lecture halls saying, what the kids are watching now is bad, not like 40 years ago. And so I guess my question is, like, what's different this time? Why are we right this time for the first time ever?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's one that I started asking myself as well as I explored this project. I think that we've really been sounding the alarm recently, but I think that a lot of the issues that are true of short-form content and YouTube are also true of television. I think that, like those examples that Neil Postman talked about before, a lot of the issues that we see with short form content have emerged in television, and I think it's really just that it's in its most potent form right now. I think that we see that television transformed how information is being communicated, because now it needs to be squeezed between commercial breaks, right? That meant that a very serious conversation or political debate now has to fit within these content segments. It gets compressed and reduced. And so I think that that effect was just a lot slow. It revealed itself a lot more slowly, whereas I think that short form content, I think it's very obvious to us more immediately, because it is everything that is wrong about television, but in its most extreme form, if that makes sense. And I totally agree with you that I think that because there is so much content out there, it can obviously be used for good. There's obviously really good content out there. I feel like I've also managed to train my algorithm to be, for the most part, pretty helpful. And I think that if you're able to wield these tools right, they're incredibly powerful. It's just that many people get caught in the wayside into the mayhem of autoplay, and I don't think these children know how to manage, how to navigate all this landscape as a whole.
Sure. Cool. Thank you.
I'm very naive on the subject. I've never seen any of these videos.
Oh.
Sorry. I'm very naive. I've never seen any of these videos, but I think you're saying it boils down to advertising. So what are companies trying to sell to 4-year-olds?
Yeah, so I think it's less that these creators are trying to sell specific things to children. It's just that, obviously, as a creator on YouTube, I make money by getting more views and more clicks and more people watching. And so they just try, from the creator's perspective, I'm just trying to make the most attention-grabbing content as possible to keep the kid watching my video, and they make money off of that. So I think it's a lot less about the creators advertising and just knowing that they make revenue off of the advertising that YouTube takes care of. Yeah.
But there's no like specific thing they're selling at the bottom, or?
Not necessarily,
Okay.
no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Hi. So you touched on that a little bit when you talked about, for instance, the possible educational aspect of interweaving videos with other stuff like this. And Misha's question actually was kind of related to this. So there is good content out there. My question to you is, why, or rather, how much weight would you place on personal agency, both the parents' personal agency or the adults, if we're talking about adults' algorithms, to curate their algorithms and to make those multimodal learning experiences happen? Because you've talked a lot about, you know, the system and the way that it is, but you kind of left out that there is good content out there, and it is kind of on the people to search for it, right?
Yeah, so I completely agree that there is good content, we can search for it, but again, it's the burden of having to search for that content in the same way that we talk about how people are able to eat healthy in impoverished neighborhoods, but the reality is that there's food deserts. And I think this is very similar. It's that in an ideal universe, we want to reduce the barrier to entry to having great content in the hands of families and children. We want it to be as easy as possible. We want to make sure that all of the bad stuff, quite frankly, is drowned out. But in reality, it's the other way around, if that makes sense. I don't know if I addressed your question, but yeah.
I guess in a way you did.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Arlene.
Hi, Bonnie.
Hello.
I just want to quickly say, fantastic slides.
Thank you.
They just, for the storytelling, your medium absolutely was your message. I couldn't help but think about how everyone in this room was at one point a child. It makes me think of what disability advocates say about how being disabled is not just like a difference between you and me, it's just a matter of time. Like, we will all become disabled one day, and it's the same thing with being children. It's just a matter of time. And we have all, I imagine, seen things that we weren't supposed to see when we were young. And I don't even know if that was so bad for us in the same way that uncomfortable or negative experiences are not, you know, just purely bad. They actually teach us and grow us. But the issue is, like, how do we approach that transition, that inevitable transition from child to adult? Like, in legislature, we'll talk about certain ages, like 16 years old or 18 years old, when that defines like who children are. But how do you think we should actually approach that transition from content for children and content for adults?
Yeah, so that's a very valid question. Obviously, as children grow older, they have more autonomy, they're exposed to the outside world, and they should be exposed to the outside world to learn how to deal with it. I think it's about equipping, I don't have a PhD in like children's development, but I think it's about equipping children with the tools that they need so that they're ready to enter that next stage. And so I know that growing up, they would give us lectures about like online literacy and like how to protect yourself on the internet. And I know it felt very corny at the time, but I think it's very true that we should be doing what we can to help children understand, okay, like you're about to cross this threshold into this new era of content or regulations, and you need to be prepared for that. And I think that we've made an attempt at this. We have age ratings on different movies and television. Obviously, it's still up to parents and children like what you end up showing your kid, but they are recommendations that help to at least create scaffolding or frameworks for people to lean on to help them make better choices more easily.
Makes sense, thank you.
Hi there. I'm wondering if there's a risk we're being paternalistic that some media are better than others. More people are reading books than ever before, but it's mostly erotica. So I don't know if that's more enlivening to the soul than the video essay, which is a completely new type of medium, which is very educative, right? And a language you use is that we've kind of lost curation. But most people don't search for these video essays. For myself, whenever I get like an awesome reel, I look at the comments and everyone's like, I built this algorithm brick by brick, right? Like people do feel an intentionality in curating content. And I would say that probably the educational content in reels is better than SpongeBob, which I grew up with, right? So like, are we privileging some medium here unjustifiably?
Yeah, I totally understand what you mean. I think that, I'd like to think I've curated my YouTube algorithm as well. I think that there is power in being able to wield that, and I do think that different mediums have different strengths and weaknesses, like I mentioned before. I think the YouTube essay is very powerful, but there's only so much a 15-minute video can do for you compared to, say, a 300-page book. I think that when we read text, and Neil Postman dives into this in more detail in his book, it encourages us to think more critically and to pause and reflect. And these are all just built into the nature of the medium itself, right? You can stop reading at any time, think, and be like, oh, that was like kind of weird. Like that didn't make sense to me. And that's just part of the nature of the medium in of itself. Whereas with a YouTube video, you're much more likely to just like let it keep playing, to go along. Obviously, like how often do we actually pause a YouTube video to think, right? And so this is just the nature of how all these interfaces and mediums that we engage with very quietly shape like how we treat them and how we face them. But yeah, I don't know if that perfectly answers your question.
That's great, thank you.
Hi. I wanted to start by just noting the graphic design of your slides. I really appreciated that part. It was beautiful. I'd never seen anything like it. But you started by giving us a distribution of the modalities of the media children consume. And you showed us what a diminishing proportion TV and radio represent. I don't even know if you mentioned radio. It's probably so negligible. Yeah. And then sort of halfway through, you told us why TV, there's such high quality TV for kids, and that's due to regulation. And then I think one of the concluding questions was how can we make the media children consume in some ways resemble Mr. Rogers and things like that, which are so good. But when you were talking about what makes TV good, I think one of the things that I don't think you mentioned was that it's something intrinsic to TV and radio, which is that instead of playing something, you tune into it, like it's live. And so on the one hand, that takes away the selective aspect, the curation. You don't say, I'm gonna listen to this episode about this thing when I want to, but, and that might take away some freedom on the part of the consumer of the media. But on the other hand, if people don't really, what people want isn't really what they want, meaning that if they're given the choice to choose what to play, they'll play things that won't really help them, that they won't really find fulfilling. Then that aspect of TV and radio seems to offer some benefits, especially for kids. And so I'm wondering if you think that that's something important that we should try to replicate in this new kind of vision for media for kids. If you think that there should be an emphasis on live shows that you tune into.
Yeah, I think I think something that's really important is forcing children to experience the full depth of something. And I think that this is a lot more possible in the past because physicality just kind of forced commitment. Like when you pick up a book, you're not very inclined to just like put it down like at any moment. You're more likely to continue finishing the chapter or the page, etc. I think, like you said, even though maybe we're not choosing the specific show or episode we're watching, we've chosen this channel that we trust and respect, and we're letting it tell us like, okay, we're gonna watch until the end of the episode or whatever that means. And so I totally agree. I think that, I think all of us have gone through periods in our lives where we pursued hobbies and interests. At some point, the going gets tough, right? Like I remember learning piano. At one point, I was like, dang, this stuff really sucks. It's really hard work. But again, anything that is meaningful and often worth having in life requires aggregation. It requires concentrated time and attention. And so I totally agree. We need to experience the things in their entirety. And often defer, I think, that curation and judgment to experts, I would say.
So I mainly want to ask because some jurisdictions, for example, Australia, some European countries as well, are looking to have flat blanket bans on social media for people under 16 for a lot of reasons past what we're talking about today as well. And I want to get your opinion on the effects of that, also because you have the view of both the public academia view as well as the view from design of these companies who want kids and adults to be playing these games as well. So what would you see are the effects of blanket bans like that, and would they be effective in Canada, other jurisdictions too?
Great question. I think this is a question that regulators and policymakers can definitely answer better than myself. But if I were to take a jab, I think that I can help paint some of these trade-offs. I think that social media, for example, for a lot of marginalized communities, have enabled people to find connection in much more anonymous ways that they maybe otherwise wouldn't be able to or would be afraid of being ostracized for in public. And I think that is one concern with kind of banning like social media outright. I think that it does allow, I think something that social media and definitely short form content is good for is that breadth aspect. I can be exposed to a lot of viewpoints and content and interests that the algorithm might guess that I'll be interested in. I can definitely say that the algorithm has taught me new things before. But obviously we've all heard about how it also tunnel visions us. There's so many, there's this book called Careless People that was a whistleblower from Meta, and she unpacked all the horrors of Meta. I would really recommend you read that as well. And we can see that the people creating this technology often have not very ethical incentives as well. And so while it can do a lot of good, I think we should also be mindful of, some of the more insidious trade-offs. But yeah.
Thank you. An amazing presentation.
Thank you.
So you touched upon the sort of different types of content being windows, mirrors, and doors. And I really want to touch upon that doors part, because when a child sort of opens these doors for themselves through any form of media, that leads them to become what they want to be, more importantly, to really choose their career, what they want to spend the next 40 hours of their week, pretty much for the 40 years from 25 to 65 is going to be like. And so it's easy for a parent to kind of take this information and restrict their children to content to lead them to a career that they're already a part of, right? Lest they live a sad, let's say, poor life. But that creates a real blind spot now, doesn't it? Like if I have a certain career, I want my child to specifically be that certain career, and that child can risk growing up to be like, I don't want to be this, my life has no purpose, I'm alone on this barren earth, right? But on the other hand, leave the options too open, and you risk your child unironically wanting to pursue a career in becoming a 6'7" Dubai chocolate labubu bombardino crocodilo. So my question is, where is that line?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think if the line were easy to draw, I would be able to give a clear answer, obviously. But I think, yeah, so I mean, if we go back to Joel Feinberg's theory of a child's right to an open future, a fundamental part of that is an open future. It means not constraining your child to just being like an engineer or a doctor or like a lawyer, as many Asian kids are aware of. And so, yeah, I think it's very natural, obviously, that our parents will influence and bias us towards certain career paths, etc. I think it's very hard to untangle that. But I hope that this framework will actually invite people to think about, my job is to actually open as many doors as possible for my child to be happy and successful, because the way that he frames it is actually kind of probabilistically. It's that there are so many ways that my child is destined to be happy, and so I'm trying to open as many of them as possible so that they're more likely to stumble into the one that will make them happy. Yeah.
Thank you so much. An excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Woo!
Yay.
Okay, amazing. Thank you, Bonnie. That was fantastic. I have a couple quick notes, and then we're going to go to the social hour. So first is, there's one lecture left in this season. Next week, same time, same place, Alex Danko is going to be talking to us about the power of magic words. Are there words that if you say them in the right time, in the right place, in the right way, as the right person, they'll transform the world around you, transform our economy, transform our society, transform the culture? Perhaps there are. Next week, if you come by, you can find out. And that's the end of this season. Look, everyone here has now seen this lecture. You all have the same content. You've all been in the same space. You've all aggregated a certain amount of attention. You chose to be here, right? You chose to be here on a Wednesday night. You curated this experience yourself. So now you're in a room with a bunch of other people like that, and this is an amazing opportunity to talk about what you just learned. Maybe find someone you didn't come with or you don't know, talk to them for the first time. Try to maybe have like the best discussion you have all week. Push each other, try to really understand, really learn. Use your words in a way that is beautiful and meaningful. And so that's my recommendation tool. When you're outside, in the kind of main common area, there's 3 tables set up with pizza and plates next to it. There are napkins at a table over in the corner where you first walk in. If you need one, please go and get it. And we have space for another hour and a bit, and I hope to connect with you all there. Cheers. Thanks for coming.